The stain on my thumb looked harmless at first, just a faint smudge of black ink along the curve of the nail bed. I'd been asleep no more than 6 hours. No visitors, no documents, no memory of writing anything. But I know what ink smells like, and that morning my hand reeked of it. It wasn't the first strange thing that had happened lately. My name is Helen Murrow. I'm 78 years old. I've lived in the same cedar-framed house for 46 years. My late husband and I built it from scratch, literally. He poured the foundation himself with help from his brother. I handled the wiring and tiling after work, back when I had knees good enough to kneel for hours. We raised our son here. We buried my husband 10 years ago. I've kept this place standing on my own since then. And now something's off. It started small. A drawer not quite shut. A teacup placed in the wrong cabinet. My bedside clock blinking as if the power had gone out while I was asleep. But none of the other clocks had reset. I thought I was being forgetful, which happens, even when your mind is clear. At 78, you're allowed some absent-mindedness. But last week, I found a piece of mail I didn't remember receiving. A letter from a notary's office I'd never visited. Inside, a blank envelope. No return address. No message. And now this. Ink on my finger. I went to the kitchen to wash my hands, but it wouldn't come off completely. Not with soap. Not with scrubbing. The stain clung to the crease like something had pressed hard into my skin. I opened the fridge, searching for something cold, but forgot what I'd come for. I closed it again, slowly. Then I went to the living room, where the morning sun always lands on the arm of the recliner. That's where I do my reading. That morning, I didn't pick up a book. I sat there for almost half an hour, looking at nothing in particular, listening to the clock. Then I called my neighbor, Celia, who's a nurse and a good friend, though we aren't close the way women used to be in our younger days. We respect each other's quiet. But she answers when I call. Celia, I said, do you know how long it takes ink to fade from skin? Depends on the ink, she replied. Why? I told her about the stain. She paused. You didn't sign anything in your sleep, did you? It was a joke, a dry one, but something in my silence made her stop. Helen? No, I said, my voice flatter than I expected. But what if someone used me to sign something? What do you mean? I mean, I said, looking again at my thumb, what if someone took my fingerprint while I was asleep? There was a long pause. I'll come over, Celia said. She arrived with a thermos of tea and a flashlight. I'm not checking for monsters, she said with a smirk. I want to look around your doors, your locks. She did a quiet sweep of the house, found nothing broken, nothing missing. But she stopped at the back window and frowned. What? Do you always keep it unlocked? I don't, I said. And that latch is on the inside. She didn't say anything more, but I saw the look in her eyes, doubt or worry. That night, I locked every door twice, pulled the curtains tight, took my cup of tea and stared at my thumb until it faded to a faint gray line. And when I went to sleep, I did so wearing gloves, not for warmth, but to see in the morning if they'd be gone. They weren't. But 3 days later, I received a letter from the county recorder's office. An automatic notice. Transfer of property documents have been registered. Final review pending. I read that sentence 6 times before I understood what it meant. Then I put on my shoes, got my handbag, and walked to the courthouse. The courthouse smelled like old carpet and copier toner. It was a Thursday, just past noon, and the reception desk was empty except for a young woman tapping on her phone with acrylic nails like bird claws. She didn't look up when I approached. "I received a notice about a property transfer," I said. She glanced at me, then at the envelope I was holding. "Residential or commercial?" "Residential, my house." She blinked, then turned to her computer. "Name?" "Helen Murrow. It was filed under my name." She clicked through something on her screen, then frowned. "Do you have ID?" I passed her my license. She stared at it, then at the screen again. "It says here the property's being transferred to Akira Dillon." I felt my knees tighten, but I didn't sit. "That's my niece." "Then it's family," the clerk said with a small shrug, like that explained everything. "I didn't sign anything," I said. "Well, according to the file, you did." She turned the monitor slightly. A scanned image of my thumbprint sat on the screen. Underneath, a digital rendering of a signature that looked like mine, but not quite. The tail of the H curled too sharply. The slant was too aggressive. My hand hasn't written like that in years. "Who filed this?" "Ms. Dillon. She submitted notarized documents. It's still in the review phase, so technically nothing's final until next week, but it's already in the queue." I nodded once, then asked for a copy of everything. Paid $5. Walked out holding a manila envelope that felt heavier than any book I'd ever carried. The breeze outside smelled of hot concrete and diesel. I walked to the bench near the bus stop and sat. Inside the envelope, a complete transfer packet. "Gift of property," it said, "signed voluntarily." The notary's name wasn't one I recognized. The witness signature was even more troubling. Thomas Verne, my neighbor, 2 houses down. I sat with that for a long time, watching cars pass, wondering how much they paid him, or if they fooled him too. Back home, I laid everything out on the kitchen table. The transfer forms, the supposed notarization, the witness page, my thumbprint in black ink, the faint curve of a signature that might pass for mine to someone who didn't know the difference. I'd made tea, forgot to drink it. It cooled beside me while I stared at the papers. It wasn't just betrayal. It was violation. My hand, my name, my home, taken while I slept. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed up in the recliner, lights on, a small flashlight in my pocket, and the front door chain latched from the inside. I kept listening for sounds, imagining footsteps, thinking about every night I had felt drowsier than usual, like something had settled in my body without my permission. The next morning, I went to Thomas Verne's door. He opened it, wearing slippers and a robe. "Tom," I said, "did you sign a property transfer as a witness? For Kira?" He blinked a few times. "Oh, that." "That?" I repeated. "Well, yes," he said. "She said you asked her to handle some things, said you weren't feeling up to the trip. I figured, well, I didn't think much of it. She brought the forms over, said you were resting." "I wasn't resting," I said. "I was unconscious." His eyes widened, and the color drained from his cheeks. "I never signed anything, Tom. I never asked her to manage anything." He opened his mouth, then closed it. "I need you to say that, to the authorities, that you never saw me sign. That she just brought you the papers." Yes," he stammered. "Yes, of course. I didn't realize. Helen, I swear." I nodded once, turned, and left. Later that afternoon, I called the notary whose name appeared on the form. The number went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same thing. When I finally checked the state's notary directory, I found the listing, but the address was in another city. The woman had apparently been traveling for family reasons the week in question. I called Celia. "I'm going to the sheriff's office," I said. "I need someone with me." "Say no more," she replied. "I'll pick you up in 10. Sheriff Travis Carter had the sort of face that made you want to believe in fairness. Square jaw, soft voice, eyes that lingered long enough to show he was listening. He offered me a seat in his office and waited until Celia and I settled before he said a word. "Ms. Murrow," he said, "I read your initial report. You believe your niece used your fingerprint to authorize a transfer of your house while you were asleep." "I don't believe it," I said. "I know it." He glanced at Celia, then back to me. "Have you spoken to her directly?" "No," I said. "I haven't spoken to Kira in over a week. Last time she was here, she brought dinner. I felt groggy afterward, fell asleep in the chair. When I woke up, the back window was cracked open and a teacup was in the sink. I never drank the tea." "And the ink?" "On my thumb. Smelled like notary ink. I worked in admin 30 years. I know that smell. The stain lasted 3 days." He nodded. "We'll need to take statements. From your neighbor, from the notary, if we can locate her. But I want to be honest with you." Celia leaned forward, but I raised my hand gently. I was listening. "This is a civil issue until we can prove criminal intent," Sheriff Carter said. "Forgery, if proven, is a felony. But proving that the fingerprint was taken without consent, that's not easy, especially when the forms have already been filed. If a notary and a witness claim everything was legitimate." "But the notary wasn't even in town," I interrupted. "She has a listed address 2 counties over. I called the state directory. She was visiting family that week." That seemed to give him pause. "Do you have any evidence she wasn't here?" he asked. "Only her voicemail and her listed address." "That's something," he said, tapping his fingers on the desk. "We can start there." He had Deputy Morales come in to take my statement. Young, polite, meticulous. She recorded everything: dates, times, the letter I'd received, the forms I'd printed at the courthouse. She even took a photo of the faint stain still lingering near my cuticle. After an hour, I walked out with a case number and a headache. Back home, I found the lights on and the hallway rug turned slightly askew. I froze, then exhaled. It was Kira. She'd let herself in before, with the spare key she'd insisted I give her for emergencies. I changed the locks that evening. The next day, I went to the bank. "Can I help you, Ms. Murrow?" the manager, Douglas Lane, asked. He was in his 50s, always wore too much cologne, but he remembered names and never made you feel like a number. "I'd like to review the power of attorney on my accounts." He looked up from his screen. "Has something happened?" "I need to see who has access." He pulled it up, hesitated. "Is Kira Dillon listed?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "Limited power. Authorized to manage payments, request documents, and make changes with your verbal consent." "She doesn't have that consent anymore." "Understood." He moved efficiently, printing forms, walking me through the revocation process. It took 15 minutes. When it was done, I felt something lift off my shoulders, like a rope that had been tugging from behind had finally snapped. I walked out into the sunlight and bought myself a lemon tart from the bakery on Hollow Street. Sat on the bench outside and ate it slowly, watching people pass. It felt like reclaiming something, even if it was just the taste of citrus and sugar. That evening, Kira called. I let it ring once, twice. Then I answered. "Hi, Aunt Helen," she said sweetly. "I've been trying to reach you. Everything okay?" "I changed the locks," I said. "You won't be coming in unannounced anymore." There was a pause, then a little laugh. "That's fine. I just wanted to check in." "Then check this," I said. "I spoke to the sheriff, the bank, the recorder's office. I know everything." She was silent. "Do you think I don't remember how you hovered around me after dinners? How I'd wake up groggy after the tea you brought? You think 78 means I'm blind? I don't know what you think you know. I know you forged a transfer with my fingerprint. I know you filed it while I was unconscious. And I know your so-called witness never saw me sign a thing. Her tone shifted. Listen, I don't know what's gotten into you, she snapped. But maybe it's time to talk about options. Maybe you shouldn't be alone in that house anymore. And there it was. The shift from sweet to threatening. From checking in to taking over. Kira, I said, the next time you call me, it better be through a lawyer. And I hung up. The next morning, there was a car parked across from my house. Gray sedan. Tinted windows. I watched it from behind the curtain, unmoving, for half an hour. No one got out. No one rang the bell. It left just before noon. I made a note of the plate. At 78, you learn not to call everything paranoia. Sometimes the world really is shifting around you, and no one tells you until it's too late. But I've lived too long to play the quiet victim. I've seen neighbors swindled out of their homes, women who couldn't fight back or didn't think they could. I won't be one of them. That afternoon, Celia and I drove to the notary's office listed on the transfer document. 2 towns over. A converted craftsman bungalow with a shingle roof and a wooden sign out front. Langley and Daughters, notary services. A woman in her 50s opened the door. Hair in a twist, sensible shoes. Are you Janet Langley? I asked. She nodded. Yes? I handed her a copy of the form. This is your name, your stamp. You supposedly notarized this transfer for me. She took it, glanced at the page. Her eyes narrowed. I didn't notarize this, she said. Are you sure? I was out of town that week. My daughter had surgery in Portland. I have flight receipts, hotel bills, texts. I couldn't have been in Greystone. I haven't even been to that courthouse in years. Then someone forged your signature, Celia said. Janet looked between us, clearly unsettled. You should report this. I'll give you a signed statement. This is a federal offense. She made us tea while she typed it out. Signed the paper slowly, carefully, then handed it to me with both hands. Ms. Murrow, she said, I'm sorry your family is doing this to you. I nodded once. So am I. Back at the sheriff's office, Deputy Morales added Janet's statement to my file. She looked up from the folder with a grim set to her mouth. This is starting to look very bad for your niece, she said. Good, I replied. It was the first time I'd used that word with such satisfaction in years. The next day, Kira showed up at my door. She didn't knock, just stood there, arms crossed, like she expected me to fold the moment she showed her face. Aunt Helen, she said, we need to talk. I opened the door just enough to block the entrance with my body. You can say what you need to from the porch. Her expression tightened. You're embarrassing yourself. You're chasing shadows. People are starting to talk. Let them talk, I said. They'll get to the part where you forged documents with my fingerprint. That should be interesting. Her eyes narrowed. I'm trying to help you. You're trying to steal what you didn't earn. I took care of you. You brought me tea and took my mail. That's not care. That's reconnaissance. She stepped forward, voice rising. You're not well. You're confused. We should talk to someone, maybe get you assessed. There it was again. The threat of madness. You want me declared incompetent? I said flatly. So the court lets you finish what you started. She didn't answer. I've spoken to a lawyer, I lied. I hadn't. Not yet. He thinks this qualifies as attempted fraud, identity theft, and elder abuse. You'll be lucky if the only thing you lose is the house you never had. Kira's face paled. I've documented everything, I added. Every call, every letter, every night I woke up feeling drugged after your visits. For a second, she looked like a child caught stealing. Then the mask snapped back in place. "You're making a mistake," she said. "No," I replied. "You did. And now you're going to find out what it feels like to be shut out." I closed the door. This time, I locked it from the inside. Then I went to the kitchen, sat at the table, and opened the phone book. I wasn't bluffing anymore. It was time to call a lawyer. His name was Daniel Shore. 63 years old, clean-shaven, clear-eyed, and with the kind of quiet patience I hadn't seen in a man since my husband died. His office was on the second floor of a squat brick building above a closed-down travel agency. When I told him my story, he didn't interrupt. He just listened, pen still in hand, not scribbling a single note until I was done. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and let out a slow breath. "Well," he said, "they picked the wrong woman." That made me smile, though it barely touched the fatigue behind my eyes. "I've got sworn statements," I said. "From the notary. From the neighbor she used as a false witness." "And you've revoked the power of attorney?" "Yes. Locked her out of the bank, too." "Good. That gives us something to work with. Now, we'll file an injunction to freeze the property transfer process. Since it's still in review, we may be able to stop it before it goes through." "And if it already has?" "Then we fight it," he said calmly. "Forgery, coercion, elder abuse. Civil suit and criminal complaint side by side. I've seen it before, but rarely this well documented." He made copies of everything. He had me sign 2 affidavits. Then he turned the file toward me. "We're going to request a full freeze on your title. Nobody touches the house until this is resolved. That includes Kira." "Good," I said. "Let her find somewhere else to squat." He didn't ask me why Kira had done it. He didn't ask if I'd ever forgiven her mother, or why I'd kept her in my life all these years. He didn't need to. "Do you want to press charges?" he asked. I looked out the window. The trees were turning already, rust-colored leaves dancing across the glass like something too tired to hold on. "Yes," I said. "I want her to feel the weight of what she's done. Then we'll proceed." Back home, I found a note shoved under my door. Folded twice, no envelope. "You're ruining everything. Stop before it gets worse." No signature. But I recognized the handwriting. Kira always looped her Y's too tight. She was sloppy when she was afraid. I took a photo of the note and sent it to Daniel. Then I taped the paper into a plastic folder, marked the date and time. I kept it next to my old photo albums. That night, Celia stayed over. I didn't ask. She just showed up with a casserole and an overnight bag and said, "Move over. I'm taking the recliner." I let her. We didn't talk much, just watched an old black and white movie on low volume and listened to the autumn wind rake against the windows. At one point, she said, "Do you think she planned this for months?" I didn't answer right away. "Yes," I said eventually. "I think she thought I wouldn't notice or wouldn't fight. She's going to regret that. I know." The next morning, the sheriff called. "We've reviewed the statement from the notary. Our office is opening a criminal investigation," he said. "We'll be interviewing your niece this week." I thanked him, then sat back in the kitchen chair and looked at the familiar shape of the cabinets, the worn edges of the counter where years of chopping had left faint scars. I thought about all the women I'd known over the years who never stood up, who let people take and called it love. Not me. Not anymore. They served Kira the summons on a Tuesday. I didn't hear it from her, of course. I heard it from Celia, who heard it from Deputy Morales' sister, who worked the desk at the courthouse. Small towns have their downsides, but information moves quickly when it wants to. Celia called while I was trimming the dead heads off my rose bushes. They handed it to her in the parking lot, she said. Right in front of the pharmacy. You should have seen her face. I didn't ask what it looked like. I could imagine it perfectly. Tight mouth, eyes wide, a twitch at the corner of her lip, like she was deciding whether to cry or scream. I went inside and put the shears away. Then I sat at the table and opened the envelope Daniel had sent the day before. Inside, copies of the injunction order, confirmation that the transfer of property had been legally halted, and a printed summary of our pending case. Kira Dillon is being investigated for attempted fraud, forgery, and elder abuse. The words looked sterile on the page. Professional. Legal. But behind them, I felt something else rise in me. Not satisfaction exactly, not yet. Just the beginning of justice stretching its limbs after a long nap. Later that day, I got another call. Not Kira, my sister, Luann. We hadn't spoken in months. Not because of any big fight, just a slow erosion over time. Life got quieter. People stopped calling unless they needed something. Helen, she said, I just heard. What in God's name is going on with Kira? So she knew. I could ask you the same, I replied. She said you were confused, that you were lashing out. I'm neither. Silence stretched between us. She didn't tell me about the house, Luann said quietly. Not a word. That's because she knew what she was doing was wrong. I raised her better than that. I'm sure you thought you did. She didn't defend Kira again. She didn't apologize either. Just sat in that uneasy space between the two. Let me know if you need anything, she finally said. I needed someone to notice, I said. That's past now. When we hung up, I didn't feel angry, just emptied of hope where family was concerned. That evening, I found Kira parked outside again. This time, she didn't hide it. She got out of her car as I approached the gate, dressed too neatly, as if she thought presentation could still save her. You don't have to go through with this, she said. We can fix it. Settle. Quietly. I told you, I said. You'll speak to me through a lawyer. Aunt Helen, this is going to destroy my career, my future. And you tried to destroy my home, I said. Funny how those things balance. You're being vindictive. No, I'm being precise. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her eyes flicked toward the porch, as if part of her still expected to be let in. As if years of my kindness could be weaponized one last time. I turned my back to her and walked away. The next morning, I received a letter from Daniel. Her lawyer had reached out. They were offering a deal. If I dropped the criminal complaint, Kira would relinquish all claims to the house. No contest, no appeal. I stared at the letter a long time. Then I picked up the phone and called Daniel. I'm not dropping anything, I said. And for the first time in weeks, I heard him smile. By the end of the week, my mailbox was full. Not with threats or offers, but with letters from people I hadn't heard from in years. Doris from church, Melinda, who used to run the garden club, even old Mr. Reed, who once called my hedge an affront to symmetry. They all wrote versions of the same thing. I heard what she did. I'm so sorry. I hope you're okay. And in every one of them, I saw something else. Quiet fear. Not fear for me, but fear that something similar might happen to them. That one day they'd wake up with ink on their skin and no roof over their head. I answered every letter. Handwritten replies, folded carefully, sealed with my old set of floral stamps. Not because I owed anyone anything, but because there's power in reminding people that silence isn't the only option. At Daniel's office, things moved faster than expected. "She's not contesting the freeze," he told me, "which means she knows her case won't hold." "She still thinks I'll fold," I said. "She's about to find out what you're made of." We prepared for the preliminary hearing. A small courtroom, just the basics. No jury, no cameras, just facts. Kira wouldn't even be required to speak, but I would, and I planned to. I rehearsed my statement for days, in the kitchen, in the hallway mirror, out loud to no one. I rewrote it until it sounded less like a wound and more like a verdict. The night before the hearing, I took out an old box from my closet. Inside, the deed to the house, dated 1981. My husband's signature still crisp beside mine. A faded Polaroid of us standing on the porch, tools in hand. Me with frizzy hair and paint on my overalls. Him grinning like he'd built the world. I put the photo in my purse. I wanted it with me in court. Morning came gray and damp, like the sky had forgotten how to shine. Celia drove me in silence. She didn't try to coach me or comfort me. She knew better. Daniel met us on the courthouse steps. "You ready?" I nodded. The courtroom was small, as expected. A few observers, a stenographer, a judge with thick glasses and a voice like gravel. Kira sat at the other table, eyes cast downward. Her lawyer leaned in occasionally to whisper something, but she didn't respond. When it was my turn to speak, I stood without help. "My name is Helen Murrow," I began. "I'm 78 years old. I've lived in the same house for over 4 decades. I built it with my husband. I raised a son there. I buried my husband there. And I intended to die in that house someday. But not like this. Not tricked out of it. Not erased from my own life by someone who claimed to love me." I paused. The room was still. "I didn't sign those papers. I didn't consent to that transfer. My fingerprint was taken while I slept. My name was forged. And my niece, who I trusted, attempted to take what she had no right to." Another pause. "I may be old, but I am not gone. I am not stupid. I am not helpless. I am here to reclaim what is mine and to remind anyone listening that getting older doesn't mean surrendering your dignity." When I finished, the judge nodded once. "Thank you, Ms. Murrow." I sat, and for the first time since this began, I felt not just heard, but seen. Kira never looked at me. She just kept her eyes on the table like there was something written there only she could read. After the hearing, Daniel said, "That was stronger than anything I could have written." I didn't reply. I just nodded, clutching my purse with the old photograph inside. Outside the courthouse, the air felt heavier, damp from early autumn rain. Kira walked past us without a word, her lawyer trailing behind her. I watched the click of her heels on the pavement, sharp and nervous, like she was trying to outrun the silence clinging to her. That evening, I sat by the window and opened a letter from the county clerk's office. A formal acknowledgement that the injunction had been filed and would remain in place pending final review. That gave us breathing room. 2 months, maybe more. But breathing room wasn't the same as peace. The next morning, I got a voicemail from the sheriff's office. Deputy Morales. "Ms. Murrow, just an update. We've confirmed the notary was indeed out of town during the time of the alleged signing. Her statement has been verified with hotel and airline receipts. That strengthens the forgery charge significantly. I'll be forwarding this to the district attorney's office." I listened to it twice. Then I opened my back door and stepped into the yard. I hadn't touched the garden in days. Weeds creeping up the edges, soil dry around the hydrangeas. I grabbed my gloves and got to work. Knees stiff, fingers slow, but steady. It was one of the few things that still brought me calm. Tending something living, fixing what had been neglected. That's what this all was now, repairing the damage. Even if it wasn't visible from the outside. By afternoon, I had dirt under my nails and a dull ache in my spine, but the garden looked like itself again. I sat on the porch with a cup of lukewarm tea and watched the wind move the trees. Celia came by around 4. She didn't ask questions, just brought me a box of shortbread and sat beside me. She won't stop, I said. She'll find another way. She might, Celia agreed. But next time, you won't be sleeping. That stuck with me. Next time, I won't be sleeping. The phone rang again after sunset. A different voice this time. Male. Hesitant. "This is Brad Foster," he said. "I represent Ms. Dillon. I was hoping we could discuss a resolution." "She already offered a deal," I said. I declined. "This would be a broader settlement," he continued. "She's willing to relinquish all claims to the house in writing and withdraw from any future disputes. And in exchange, she's asking that no criminal complaint be pursued." "Too late," I said. "The sheriff's already moved it to the DA." "She's worried about jail time," he said quietly. "She should be." There was a pause. "Ms. Murrow," he said, "I don't mean to be forward, but do you believe she would have gone through with it? Kicked you out, I mean." I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I said. "I think she'd already planned where my furniture would go. Probably had the locksmith on standby." He exhaled. "Then I suppose there's nothing more to say." "There isn't." After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the creak of the house, the memory of my husband's voice still alive in the boards. He always said, "People think kindness is weakness until it tells them no." Well, I'd finally said it. By the time the district attorney's office officially opened their case, Kira had vanished from Greystone. Not literally. Her car was still parked in front of that overpriced condo she couldn't really afford. But she wasn't showing her face. She didn't come to the pharmacy, didn't show up at church. And for someone who used to treat small-town attention like a spotlight, her sudden absence was louder than any confession. Celia called it cowardice. I called it calculation. She was waiting, hoping the storm would pass without her having to face it. But storms like this don't pass. They sit and soak the ground until the foundation starts to rot. Daniel updated me twice a week. The paperwork crawled, but we were making headway. "The DA's office is treating this as a serious elder abuse case," he said. "Forgery's only part of it now. They're looking into how long she had access to your accounts, your medical records, even your mail." I nodded. I remembered the way bills went missing, how she used to sort my letters to be helpful, the way she'd hold my pills and remind me, "You already took one," when I hadn't. How many months had she been preparing? I don't know when love turned into ownership for her, but it had. Like I was a plot of land waiting to be acquired. Not anymore. 2 weeks later, I received a notice from the bank. A failed attempt to access my accounts. Someone had tried to log in using an old authorization code. The system flagged it and blocked the IP. Daniel had that notice added to the case file the same day. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I drove myself out of town. It wasn't far, just 20 minutes to the lake, the same one where my husband and I used to go in our younger years. I parked near the overlook and sat on the hood of the car, watching the ripples on the water. It felt like breathing for the first time in weeks. When I got home, there was another letter on the porch. No envelope this time, just folded paper, heavy with accusation. "Do you feel proud? Destroying your own blood? You always were cold." This time, it wasn't even signed, just left there like a threat, too scared to show its face. I slid it into a clear sleeve and added it to the folder. Let the court see it all. The next few days passed in a blur of legal calls, quiet meals, and long evenings with Celia. We didn't always talk about the case. Sometimes we just sat on the porch with tea, saying nothing. That kind of silence is rare. The kind that says, I'm still here. You're not alone. On Friday morning, Daniel called again. She's been formally charged, he said. Forgery, attempted fraud, and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. I didn't react right away. Just stood in the kitchen, letting the words settle. They'll issue a court summons first, he added. But if she ignores it, there'll be a warrant. She won't ignore it, I said. She wants to play victim too badly. Daniel hesitated. There's one more thing. I braced myself. She filed a statement this morning, he said, claiming you're mentally unfit to manage your own property, that you're confused, possibly manipulated, and showing signs of early dementia. I didn't flinch. I expected it. She's requesting a court-appointed evaluation. Let them come, I said. My voice didn't even shake. The evaluator's name was Dr. Naomi Brenner, early 40s, sharp-eyed but not unkind. She came alone, carrying a soft leather briefcase and a small voice recorder she placed on the kitchen table without ceremony. This is standard procedure, she said. You're not under suspicion. This isn't an interrogation. I know, I said, pouring her a cup of tea. But the accusation is clear enough. She gave a small smile. Let's talk. We sat for almost 2 hours. She asked about the house, about my routines, my finances. Asked me to recall a list of words, draw a clock, walk across the kitchen and back. She watched how I stood, how I spoke. She didn't rush, and she didn't condescend. Halfway through, I told her about the roses, how they'd stopped blooming the year after my husband died, how I couldn't bring myself to uproot them, even though I knew they'd never come back. Sometimes we need reminders of things that don't work, I said, to know when something finally does. She nodded, jotting something down. At the end, she folded her hands on the table and looked at me. Ms. Murrow, she said, I'm not supposed to say this until the report is filed, but I'll say it anyway. You're fine. Clear, competent, sharper than most people I evaluate. I know, I said, and she smiled. But Kira won't stop here, she added. You understand that? She's desperate. Desperate people can be dangerous. I looked past her to the window where the light caught the edge of the porch railing, paint peeling, wood dry. The place still stood, but the damage would take time to fix. She already was, I said. After she left, I opened a fresh notebook and wrote everything down. Every question, every answer, every expression she made. Because Kira would challenge it. Of course she would. She couldn't afford not to. The next day, I went to the post office and filed a change of forwarding address. Not because I was leaving, but because I wanted every legal notice to come to Daniel directly now. I was done reading threats on my doorstep. I also stopped by the garden supply shop. Bought new gloves, new soil, a stubborn little maple sapling that would take years to reach the shade I remembered from childhood. I planted it in the front yard that evening. Took me an hour. My knees hated me for it, but when it was done, I stood there with my hands on my hips, breath shallow, and whispered, "Grow faster than her memory." Later that night, Kira called again. Blocked number. I picked up. You set this whole thing up, she said. Her voice was smaller than before, almost brittle. No, I said. You did. I just stopped helping you get away with it. She was quiet for a beat. I just needed help. I was drowning. And I was the raft you planned to stand on while I sank. You've ruined me. No, Kira, you did that. I just pulled the curtains back. Then I hung up. I didn't save the number. Didn't write it down. Some things are better left to fade. 3 days later, I received the official letter from Dr. Brenner's office. Stamped, signed, and worded with all the dignity bureaucracy could muster. Ms. Murrow is mentally competent to manage her own affairs. No further evaluation is recommended. I made 3 copies, one for Daniel, one for the court, and one for myself. The original I tucked inside the front page of our old family Bible. I don't read it much these days, but something about that gesture felt right. Like putting a name back on a door someone tried to remove. Daniel called that afternoon. She tried to contest the evaluation, he said. Filed a motion claiming the process was flawed, that you were coached. She never tires, does she? No, but the judge denied it. Summary rejection, no grounds. And more importantly, he scheduled the fraud hearing. When? 2 weeks. That number stuck in my chest like a pin. 14 days. After all this time, the real moment was finally coming. Not just the freeze or the testimony, but the decision. I walked out onto the porch and watched the maple sapling. One leaf had already turned yellow. Inside, I made a list of everything I wanted to show the court. Not just papers, evidence. Photographs of ink-stained fingers. A printout of Kira's text. The folded threats. And the statements from the notary and neighbor, which now carried the quiet weight of fact. That evening, I went to the attic. It had been years since I'd climbed those stairs. Everything up there was layered in dust and silence. I found the box I was looking for under the old steamer trunk. House plans, 1978, 1981. My husband's notes, pencil sketches, copies of permits with both our names at the bottom. We'd built the place beam by beam. You don't erase that with a stolen signature. I brought the box down and spent the evening sorting. It wasn't for the court. It was for me, to remember what I was fighting for. The next morning, Celia knocked with 2 cups of coffee and a face that said she didn't like what she'd just heard. She's talking to people, she said. Trying to spin this. Of course she is. She says you've turned everyone against her, that this is revenge. I sipped my coffee. Good. Let her be loud. The truth doesn't have to shout. Celia studied me for a long moment. You scared? I considered that. No, I said. Just tired of waiting to breathe. A few hours later, Daniel dropped by with a manila folder. Everything's ready, he said. Your witness list is confirmed. The judge has approved all the statements. You'll testify, and if we're lucky, that's all it will take. And if we're not lucky, then she'll take the stand, and we'll get to watch her unravel. I nodded. He paused before leaving. You know, Helen, most people don't fight this hard. I'm not most people. No, he said, you're not. After he left, I sat by the window and watched the light fall across the maple. I thought about everything Kira might still try. Lies, smears, legal delays. But I also thought about the feel of the soil under my hands, the way the courtroom had gone still when I spoke. The moment Dr. Brenner looked me in the eye and said, "You're fine." Whatever happened next, I wouldn't flinch. I'd already survived worse. The courthouse was colder than I remembered. Maybe it was the marble, or maybe it was just me, thin-blooded after a lifetime of enduring. I wore the dark green dress I'd kept for serious occasions and a wool coat that still smelled faintly of lavender from the sachets I'd tucked inside every drawer for decades. Celia sat beside me in the front row. Daniel was at the table, papers neatly stacked, his pen uncapped and ready. Across the aisle, Kira's chair was empty. "She'll show," Daniel said without looking up. "She always wants the last word." And she did. She entered 5 minutes before the judge, flanked by her attorney, dressed in black, like she was the one mourning. She didn't look at me, didn't look at anyone, just sat down and adjusted her collar like she was on her way to a luncheon, not a reckoning. The judge called us to order. Daniel stood and made his opening statement. Calm, precise, just like we'd rehearsed. The sequence of events, the evidence of forgery, the sworn affidavits, the psychological evaluation, the threats, the banking breach. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The truth sat in the room like weight. When it was my turn, I walked to the stand slowly, but without help. I didn't look at Kira. I looked at the judge, at the ceiling fans spinning lazily overhead, at the people in the gallery, some strangers, some familiar. I spoke clearly, as I had before, but this time I ended with something new. "I am not here for revenge," I said. "I am here for clarity, for recognition, for the quiet truth that a woman can be old without being disposable. That dignity doesn't retire when your hair turns white." No one made a sound. When I stepped down, I passed Kira's table. She glanced at me for the briefest second, just long enough to see the fear behind her carefully painted eyes. Then it was her turn. Her lawyer kept it short. Tried to minimize. She was under stress. There was confusion. Misunderstandings. She never intended harm. She was only managing things temporarily. But when the judge asked Kira directly whether she had obtained my fingerprint knowingly, whether she'd submitted the transfer without me awake, her mouth hesitated. And that hesitation cost her everything. Daniel leaned over and whispered, "That's enough." We rested the case. The judge said a ruling would be issued in 3 business days. Formal, expected, but we all knew how it would go. Outside the courthouse, Kira stood by the railing, her lawyer already walking ahead, his briefcase swinging like a closing door. She called after me once. "Aunt Helen." I stopped. She stepped closer, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "You really won't forgive me?" I looked at her. Really looked. A woman who had once been a child on my knee. A teenager who used to braid my hair when she was bored. A woman who came back not to care, but to claim. "I forgave you the moment I understood what you were," I said. "But that's not the same as letting you stay." She didn't speak again, and I walked away without turning back. The ruling came on a Thursday. Daniel called just after lunch. His voice was calm, but I could hear the satisfaction beneath it, like the weight of everything we'd carried had finally settled into place. "We won," he said. "Every count. The house remains yours, uncontested." The judge's statement was clear. Kira acted with intent to defraud, using deceptive means and abusing a position of trust. She's barred from making any future claims. I didn't cry. Not then. I just closed my eyes and let out a breath I hadn't known I'd been holding for months. "There'll be a restitution hearing," Daniel added. "They may require her to pay your legal fees." "I don't care about that," I said. "She can keep her money." "Even so," he said, "it's over." But it wasn't. Not entirely. That evening, I opened the old cedar chest in the hallway, the one with our wedding photos, the land deed, the notes my husband scribbled when we first mapped the layout of the house. I laid everything out on the kitchen table and looked at it all like a museum of my life. 46 years in one place. Every beam, every tile, every winter draft. It had never been just a house. It was the last thing left that hadn't been taken. Until now, I hadn't realized how close it had come to disappearing, not with a fire or a storm, but with a pen, a fingerprint, a lie. That's how they do it these days. The next day, Celia came by with flowers, wild marigolds. "You don't strike me as a marigold person," I said. "They're stubborn," she said. "Grow anywhere, even through concrete." We sat on the porch and said nothing for a long time. Just watched the wind move the trees, the maple sapling still holding fast in the soil I'd given it. At one point, she turned to me and asked, "What will you do now?" I didn't answer right away. Eventually, I said, "Live here." It sounded simple, but it wasn't. It meant unlocking the doors again, reclaiming the quiet without fear, letting the sun pour in through the windows without wondering who might be watching from the car across the street. It meant planting new things, letting old things die. That night, I slept without gloves, without lights on. I locked the doors just once, and I let myself believe that maybe, for the first time in months, I could stop bracing for the next betrayal. In the morning, there were no new letters on the porch, no voicemails from unknown numbers, just birdsong and the sound of the wind through clean windows. I poured a cup of coffee, opened the screen door, and stood barefoot on the porch. It was mine again. All of it. A week passed before I saw Kira again. It was at the grocery store. I'd gone early, before the crowds, hoping for a quiet trip. Just bread, milk, and the good honey they only stock once a month. She was standing near the frozen foods, her cart empty, her eyes scanning the labels like she might find something else there. She looked thinner, not sick, just stripped down, like someone who'd been caught trying to wear a life that didn't fit. Our eyes met. I didn't look away. She gave a small nod, half a greeting, half surrender, and turned down another aisle. I didn't follow. There was nothing more to say. The community, too, had changed. People greeted me differently now, not out of pity, but with a kind of cautious respect, as if they'd seen something in me they hadn't expected. Doris from church invited me to speak at the women's circle. Just about strength, she said. About what it means to hold your own. I declined. Not because I didn't want to help, but because I wasn't ready to become a story for others yet. This was still mine, still too close. Daniel stopped by the house with final papers, court-certified documents stating the full reversal, the official dismissal of Kira's petition, the dismissal of all her claims. "You could file a civil suit for damages," he said. "You'd win." "I already did," I replied. And I did. He didn't argue. Before he left, I asked him about something I'd been thinking about for weeks. If I wanted to donate the house someday, I said, to make it into something useful, not just after I'm gone, but while I'm still here, how would I do that? He paused. "There are ways," he said. "We could create a trust or a foundation. What do you have in mind?" "A place for women like me," I said. "Older, alone. People think we're weak, easy to talk over, take from. Maybe they'd think twice if they had somewhere to go, somewhere steady." "I can draft options," he said. "Do." That evening, I walked the length of the property, touched the edges of the walls, let my fingers trail the porch rail. I knew every crack in the sidewalk, every creak in the boards. I'd spent so long protecting this place. Now I wanted to turn it into something that could protect others. Later, I found a letter in the mail from the DA's office. Kira had accepted a plea deal, probation, community service, mandatory financial ethics course. no jail time. I sat with that for a while. I wasn't angry, just aware. She'd walk away with her freedom, but not with her lie. That's what mattered. Not punishment, truth, and what I did with mine next. The house is quiet these days, but not empty. There's a difference. Silence used to feel like waiting, like I was holding my breath, expecting the next noise, the next knock, the next letter. Now, silence feels earned. It's the sound of something that held, something that didn't break. I wake up early, not out of habit, but by choice. I like watching the first light stretch across the floorboards. The kitchen still creaks when I walk across it. The kettle still whistles a little off key. Everything's exactly as it was, except me. I'm different. Not louder, not harder, just steadier. The maple sapling in the yard is holding strong. It won't give shade for years, but that doesn't matter. What matters is that it's growing, that it has space, like I do. The women's circle asked again if I'd come speak. This time, I said yes. I told them what happened, not to scare them, not to shame anyone, but because stories like mine stay in the shadows too long. They nodded. Some cried. One woman, Judith, held my hand afterward and said, "You've given me permission to not be quiet." That stayed with me. Later that month, I met with Daniel again. We started the paperwork for the trust. The house will one day become a transitional residence for older women escaping abuse, financial or otherwise. A place with strong walls and steady ground. I'll still live here, of course, for as long as I can. But I want this space to matter, even after me. I want someone else to look at this porch and say, "I'm safe here. Kira hasn't contacted me again. I hear she moved out of Greystone. I don't wish her harm. I don't wish her anything. Some people you love because you're told to, others because you choose to. I've learned which matters more. My garden's blooming again. The hydrangeas came back this year. I hadn't expected them to. But sometimes things return when you stop waiting for them and start tending what's left. If you're reading this and thinking that could have been me, let me tell you something plain. It's never too late to stop the taking. Never too late to call something wrong, even if you loved the one who did it. You don't have to scream to be strong. You don't have to be cruel to be firm. You just have to say no, and then say it again. If this story stayed with you, if it made you pause or breathe deeper or think of your own porch, your own name, your own worth, then let it matter. Share it. Speak it. And if you're a woman who's been made small in her own house, remember, it's still yours. It's still yours.